Is everybody having a lovely time? Have somebody seen stuff that they had no idea of before and they really fell in love with it? Yeah. Isn't that the whole good thing? I love that thing about Splendour, that you get all that sort of stuff. Now, today I'll be talking about a whole bunch of different things. I'm not an expert in anything, so I'd like to preface my remarks by a legal disclaimer, and in case I make a mistake. So, under the Goods and Services Act, Section 165(55), the Commissioner of Taxation in Australia can declare, and this is the law of Australia for you American people who wouldn't believe it, that any particular event that actually happened did not happen. That is the law in Australia. And so if I say that 1 and 1 is 3, and you say, hey, Carl, you said 1 and 1 is 3, I say, man, I'm not even here, man. On another planet, man. I'm at Splendour. I'm cool. They also get it the other way, where they can say that anything that did not actually happen did happen. And this is a fine example of quantum mechanics, where a dollar can be both in your pocket, the government's pocket, and in a little trust fund over in the Cayman Islands, all at the same time, except it doesn't seem to end up in your pocket. So I thought I'd start off firstly on this deep tutorial that we have with a little Q&A for you guys. So here we see some countries of the world, and you'll notice that there's a few little names there. I'll try to read some of them out to you, like Mohenjo-Daro. That's in Pakistan. And New York and London and Rome, yeah. Fez. Thebes. Anybody know what the link is between all of those cities? These 50 cities? The link is that at some stage in history, over the last 5,000 years, each of these 50 cities was briefly the most powerful and most populated nation and country, city-state on Earth, and it came up and it blossomed away. If you want longevity, go for the cockroach, go for the shark. Human endeavour, not so much. One thing about all of these nations, though, they seem to exclude Australia. So Australia managed to pop into existence from the British imperialist point of view around the 1920s, when Australia was classified as to its two main products from a Western point of view. It either had wheat or it had sheep, and there was all this area here in the middle which they classified as no sheep. And that was kind of how useful Australia was to the rest of the world. Now, Australia also appears, but not very favourably, in this next figure. Little purple dots. Anybody got an idea what brings all of those little purple coloured countries together? Anybody? Yep. Former what, sorry? Former Spanish colonies? No. But you're thinking you're along the right sort of pathway-ish? No? Okay. These countries are the only countries in the world that today give you a free education. And so members of my family, including my brother-in-law, has gone over to here into Germany and got an education, yay into a master's and yay into a PhD, paid for by the state, because the state sees investment in education as something worthy, as an investment in the future, not just a short-term way of making money out of the populace. And the whole thing about education is that we need an educated populace for the world, for our children, because the world matters. We all matter. You matter, until, of course, you multiply yourself by the speed of light squared, in which case you energy. But apart from that, you are mostly matter. And a few years ago, this thing happened. The fabric of space-time rippled as gravitational waves came flying through the Earth from a place 1.5 billion light years away, roughly, from an event that happened 1.5 billion years ago, when two black holes, each around 30 times the mass of the Sun, smashed into each other and formed a single black hole that was lighter by 3 solar masses. And that mass, 3 times the mass of the Sun, got turned into energy. And for a brief instant, that event put out 50 times more energy than every single star in every galaxy in the entire universe put together. It outshone the rest of the universe. So we found the first one here in 2015, where, you know, that's the mass over there. That's the end mass, about 60. 2 of them start off a bit above, a bit below 30. This one, not so sure of. Yep, that one happened in 2015, or picked up. That one in 2017. And so when it comes rippling through the Earth, the entire planet goes wibble wobble this way. Not by very much, but it does. But we built this machine with 2 laser beams, and if that arm is equal to that arm, in other words, no gravitational wave happening, nothing happens. But if one arm shifts a tiny, tiny amount, suddenly we get a signal. And just try and put it into perspective, the Earth is about 12,500 kilometres across, and this change was this small number, or if you want to put in something practical, about 2.5 times the diameter of a proton, and the whole Earth shifted this way and that way by 2.5 times the diameter of a proton. So you got your atom, then you got your nucleus, and then you got your protons. And we humans today, we have the technology to actually measure a size, not just an atom, not just a proton, but 1/10,000th of a proton. That's how good we are. Now, we can so detect gravitational waves. The next step, obviously, is to make gravitational waves, because there is something missing from our society. The hoverboard from Back to the Future 3. And with the gravitational wave manufacturer, we can have the hoverboard. But there's something deeper going on. Oh, yeah. Back on the 14th of September, in the year 2015, Tony Abbott got deposed as Prime Minister of Australia. And a few, this is conspiracy theory plus, man. A few hours later, the gravitational waves rippled through the Earth. Oh, no, wait, it's bigger than that, bigger. Who were the authors of this paper? Well, look at all those people. And these. And here's the paper. And looking at the authors were Abbott, and Abbott. A coincidence? I don't think so. I mean, there's 24 hours in a day, 24 cans and a slab of beer. Somebody knows what's going on. But we will never find out, because while we can find out the truth or otherwise of scientific conspiracies, we never can with politics until years down the line. The only place you can find real truth is in the land of science. And for that, you need the world's most popular legal drug to turn concepts into theories. I'm talking about coffee. Now, coffee has as its active ingredient in there caffeine. And caffeine has got this sort of weird shape. It's got this big thing here in the middle, and you call that a xanthine. Okay, remember it, forget it, you don't need to know anymore. And over here, you've got these three groups, CH3, they're called methyls. And so the name of this incredibly popular drug is trimethyl, because there's three of them, xanthine, and they happen to be at the 1, 3, and 7 positions. And this drug is a vasoconstrictor. Follow me on this one. There is another drug here, which I love absolutely to pieces, that one there. And it has a beautiful name, nothing unromantic like caffeine. It's called theobromine. Theo as in theology, bromine drink. Drink of the gods. Chocolate truly has been named by Linnaeus himself as the drink of the gods. And it is so similar. It's missing a methyl, so it's only a 3,7 dimethyl. And this is a vasodilator. Now it all comes together. You've got caffeine, which is a vasoconstrictor and increases your blood pressure. You've got theobromine, which drops your blood pressure. This proves one of the major philosophical questions of nature, that number one, God does exist, and number two, that she wants you to have chocolate whenever you have coffee. She said so. But it turns out that coffee is kind of good for you. If you are going to give up anything to get healthy, do not make it coffee. Right? So firstly, it improves your life expectancy. It improves the outcome if you've got liver disease. And if you are one of that unfortunate group of people who have type 2 diabetes, who, if they were put into a nation, would be the 3rd largest nation on earth, coffee improves the outcome of type 2 diabetes and prostate cancer and heart disease and oral and skin cancers. But there is a problem. All of these papers were not your classic peer-reviewed, double-blind, randomised control. They were what we call observational studies. So what you do is you observe. You get yourself, like the US nurses study, you get 1/3 of a million nurses and you follow them for 3 decades. And you go, oh yeah, if you're taller, this happens. If you're shorter, that happens. If you're rich, you're poor. Oh, and if you drink coffee. So these are observational studies. So we're needing to do the randomised double-blind studies. And this next paper does that. It comes from a really good journal, Nature Medicine, and it tells you something incredibly important that will affect most of you in this room. Cannabinol. Okay, let me try and turn it into plain English. Daily dose of cannabis extract could reverse brain's decline in old age. A little cannabis every day might keep the brain aging at bay, and marijuana may boost rather than dull the brain with age, and it improves memory. So going back to this paper, It's called a chronic, that means long term. The long term was only a month. Low dose, 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, work it out yourself. Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, I think that's one of the ingredients in marijuana, is that what you call it? Yeah. Restores cognitive function, how will you function in older mice. So they got a bunch of mice of different ages, young, mature and old, and they put a pump in their tummy and then either squirted out placebo or cannabis. And they did this for about 28 days. With the older mice, they also gave them tests. And the tests were things like, here's some water tank, just go in the water tank. Can't see a thing, but there's a hidden platform and the water level will rise and you will drown unless you go to the safe platform over there. So there were tests of memory and cognition. And the older mice, as you would expect, with age they did worse, but when you put them on marijuana extract for a month, suddenly they started behaving at the same high level of cognition and function as the younger mice. The younger mice, of course, were off their faces. That sort of kind of happens, you know. We'll explain why. We'll explain why. And when they then had a look at their brains, they found that their nerves and their synapses were not like older decayed mice, but like young mice. They found when they went looking at their stages of DNA synthesis and proteins that they were making, their brains were behaving like young mice. Why? It's to do with something called the endocannabinoid system. Endo means intrinsic, natural to yourself. Cannabinoid is cannabis. And there's this weird coincidence that plant affects meat. So if you're in terrible pain, then you might take an extract of a chemical called an opiate, which grows out of this entirely minor little plant with a red flower called the poppy in Turkey. How come the poppy affects us with pain relief? Because we have our own natural opiates that we make, and from the poppy you get the opium and it works. Same with cannabis. So the plant gives us something that is already naturally in our bodies. And so a low dose of cannabis in elderly and mature mice, mature and elderly, rejuvenates their brain. In young mice, it kind of puts them off their face. So what is this endocannabinoid system? It does everything you can think of, and we've only known about it for a decade or so. Central nervous system maturation, homeostasis, phosphorylation, neurogenesis, that's growing new nerve cells, morphogenesis, nervous system development, everywhere around is important. So the thing is here that if a younger person takes marijuana, they're already making heaps. So you start off as a baby, making hardly any at all. You get a little bit more until you hit puberty, and then bingo, from puberty till about 20 or so, your brain, your body is making it like crazy. And if you have more, you just get overloaded. So we've got a tin over there. And if anybody wants to drop their stash in the tin on the way out to help the people over the age of 21, that's perfectly fine. We accept your gift. So, because the trouble is that it interferes with your memory, like, oh wow, I went here to have a milkshake, now I can't remember what's going on. And so you walk out the front door, for example, and you forget where you parked your car, or you go down to the kitchen to get a drink and you think, why am I here in the kitchen? And then you finally work out you want to have a cup of tea and you go back to your job and you think, what was I doing when I got here? What is the problem? Is the problem that you are suffering dangerously low blood levels of cannabis or perhaps early onset dementia? No. The doorway is the problem. Everything happens in the doorway. Why? Firstly, because the universe is a dangerous place. Everything is out there to kill you. No hard feelings, it's just business. And you're always continuously on the lookout for threats. You don't know it, but you always are. It explains deja vu. Ask me about that later. And secondly, the universe is big, it's huge. And so you've got to scan everywhere all the time. And it's really hard to filter all of that information coming in. And so I was entirely surprised when I read this paper. Walking through doorways causes forgetting. Oh my God. From the paper called Walking Through Doorways Causes Forgetting. They were a bit tired that day when they did the press release. They didn't care much. So they set up this room here, and you can see that the house, in fact, has got a whole bunch of rooms, and also there's a whole bunch of doorways, and also there's some X's. And the X's are where they had tables. Now there's a lot of room over here down at the front. Come on down, get yourself comfortable. And so what they would do is go to one table, pick up something, and see if they still remember what it was when they went to the next table. Put it in their backpack, and the items were really odd. Like there were 10 different shapes and 4 different colours, 6 different colours, a blue cube, a red wedge. You've got no way of remembering all that, especially when it's in a backpack behind you. And when you went to a new location in the same or different room, different things happened. If you went through a doorway into a different room, you forgot. Let's just run through it. So here you are, you've picked up something over here at a table there, you put it into your backpack, and you go over here, it's only about 10 seconds, and then you think, what the heck did I just put in my backpack? And then you take it out, and you can usually remember it, you do not forget. Then we make you go through a doorway. Here's the doorway, you're going through the doorway, got no idea what I just did. Maybe it's the fact you're in a different room. So let's make you go back to the same room, but through not 1, 2, 3 doorways, man, you forget. Going through the doorways is a problem. Back to the original, you don't forget. So why does the doorway wipe your memory? And it's all to do with survival. Imagine we're back a couple of thousand years, 10,000 years, 50,000 years, and we're in the jungles of Africa, and the guy that's going to kill you is the big gorilla. So you're walking around here, you're looking here, there might be some down here, but you also got to look up there, and you've got to look up there, and you've got to keep your attention for what you have learnt over time is the threat characteristic of a gorilla. And you come out of the jungle, and there's the savannah. And then you have to forget the gorilla, because if you're still thinking about the gorilla, you could get monstered by the lion. And so it is in your interest. We have been evolutionarily wired up so that when you change your environment, you forget what happened in the past. You come into the kitchen and you automatically, even though you don't realise it, you're looking out for the killer toaster, the killer dishwasher, the killer tap, and you scan them for threats, and then by the time you finish scanning, you go, why am I here? Low cannabis levels, obviously. So the treatment is, of course, open house plan, and just simply no doorways. And the trouble is, doorways, in fact, are intrinsically evil. If you ever have a party, you will end up with people going, oh, get out of the way, I want to get in there. And so what we're talking about here is the well-known syndrome of breaking the seal, which for some of the younger in the audience, I'll explain. You go around to meet a few friends, you have a few drinks, lots of room over here, folks. There's a couple of rows empty and prime seating. So come across the front, make yourself comfortable over here, way over here, 2.5 rows free. So you drop in, you have a drink, you have another drink, that's fine. You have a third drink, that's fine. You have your 4th or 5th drink, and then suddenly, not only do you want to, you have to go to the bathroom, but you've got to go again and again and again all night. And that is the answer. Here it is in 6 words. Drink a 6-pack, urinate a 10-pack. I will now explain it to you via the 2 pathways of drugs and volume. So your hydration from a drug point of view is very important. If you're working outside on a really hot day and sweating and you forgot to bring your water with you, you will generate a small quantity of very concentrated yellow urine. Or if you're in an office and you're absolutely convinced you've got to follow the GP or Gwyneth Paltrow diet and have 15 litres of water, then you'll be generating huge quantities of a very dilute urine and also getting friction burns on the inside of the urethra, but that's another story. So the hydration is very important for your body to maintain, and it's maintained by this hormone in your brain. And alcohol, which is an amazing substance. I mean, think about alcohol. You can use it to store the body parts of an axolotl in a glass jar for centuries. You can remove grease stains off your garage floor, and in small quantities it'll make human intercourse just go on better and everybody's friendlier. But it interferes with ADH, and so for every 200 mils of beer that you drink, you generate 320 mils out. And the second thing is just the sheer quantity. It's not like sort of, oh, Carl's coming around for dinner, let's line up 10 glasses of green tea, which, by the way, is high in lead, don't worry about it. So the sheer volume of what you have happening interferes with it as well. So you've just got too much liquid going through your system. Now, this sort of science, this comes from papers that have got very solid science behind them. But there are some papers that don't have good science, and this is a good one to mention up around the Byron Bay area, where you have the highest level in Australia of simultaneously the highest level of environmental awareness and the lowest vaccination rate. And so people up here believe that autism causes, autism and vaccines are related by the fact that you get a vaccine and it causes it. One paper published on it, written by a guy who had a financial interest in putting forward that interest, that idea, and then retracted, and then that guy was deregistered. Zero proof of the link between autism and vaccines, except there is a link that is just going to blow your mind. Right. So just have a look at this. You've got people who are scientists, and they're really good at concentrating, and you might find that some scientific people are so good at concentrating that if you ask them to have a cup of tea, they say, sorry, got to keep on what I'm doing. So there are some autism spectrum people being overrepresented in the research scientists, and what that means is that these scientists, they then, because they're autistic, they create vaccines. Autism causes vaccines, not the other way around. They got it wrong. And I got this from this wonderful man, Zach Wiener-Smith. If you ever get a chance, follow his cartoons, Saturday morning breakfast cereal. And he calls himself a curmudgeon, which I had to look up, and it means somebody who's a professional grumpy person. Hi, how you going? Pretty bad, how are you? Yeah, right. And in 2013, he solved one of the other major problems of the human race in somewhere as backyard as just a cartoon. He solved the major problem of why are babies shaped like footballs. And the answer is they're shaped like footballs so you can kick them gently into the next valley and thereby share around their genetic material. Now, so science needs really heavy hitters. And the next person I'll introduce you is probably one of the most famous publicised scientists in Australia who has a unique blend of the highest scientific rigour you can think of, combined with so much compassion for the people who are less fortunate than him. I'm talking, of course, about Professor Andrew Bolt. And he came out with this, among other things. First, the planet hasn't actually warmed for a decade or even 15 years, according to new temperature data. So I looked at the data that he pointed at, and blow me down, to my amateur, I mean, what would I know? But in that time period that he mentioned, it kind of looks like it's warming up, but he says, no, it's not warming up. But I look at it and I think it's warming up, but obviously I must be wrong. So he gave me this immense insight. Like, you know, the scientists with their study, they look at this and they sort of come up with a straight line. You know, it's bumpy data, of course. It's a complex system. And they come up with this straight line going up like that. Andrew Bolt, with his wisdom, with his compassion, he looked at the data and he found one cooling period. Oh no, not just one, 2, 3, 4, 5. He found 6 separate periods of cooling. And what did the scientists with their punsy PhDs and their lab coats find? How many periods of warming? 1. Ha! Come on! 6 is bigger than 1. So he's right. And this is why he's got a problem. And I know what his problem is because of my study in the past. Believe it or not, I'm one of those people. Yeah, you pick it. Yeah, that one there, right? That was me when I used to have hair before I had glitter. And I worked on... I worked for Fred Hollows. I designed and built a machine for him to pick up electrical signals off the human retina. And so I've got a special interest in the concept of the human vision. And I think that he is suffering from a condition that the medical doctors call bilateral, which means both sides, hemi, meaning half of his field of view, a, meaning not, opsia vision. So he's got a blindness in half of his field of view. And this tragic disease affects, as you can see with the case of Professor Bolt, males more than females. In the society we call it domestic blindness. Hi honey, do you know where the milk is? In the fridge. Do you know where your socks are? In your hand. Oh yeah. This terrible, give generously whenever you see anybody inquiring about domestic blindness. And the trouble with Andrew Bolt is that he can see only half the story. But really, I mean, I'm kind of with him on this one because after all we're really looking at is, well, you know, they see 1, he sees 6, which is better. And all we're talking about really is just, you know, life on Earth. It's not like it was anything important or anything. So with the global warming thing, and yes, there is life on Earth, but almost certainly there is probably life somewhere else, and we know so from 3 separate factors. Factor number 1, there is a warm liquid, which is water. Number 2, there are minerals of life, like in your body, the sodium, the potassium, etc., etc. And number 3, this is a weird one, this is the clincher, microscopic rocks, silicon dioxide. That's the one. I'll have to explain that one to you. So there is life life somewhere else. Where is this somewhere else? Around the ringed planet of Saturn. Here's a top view of Saturn, and you can see the inner rings, the A, B, C, D rings. They're really easy to see with a decent telescope. If you want to see the E for echo ring, you need a better telescope, and it's really diffuse and kind of fuzzy, and it's out here, and way in the middle of it is this thing called Enceladus, a little moon. When I say little, it's smaller than the Earth, smaller than our moon. It's about 400 kilometres across. It'll sort of cover England, and this is where we think there is life. And notice something else about that E-ring. If you look carefully, you'll see that the E-ring seems to be kind of denser there, and it is denser because that E-ring is generated by Enceladus itself. You can see Enceladus here, and it's actually squirting stuff out. Oh my God, what is it squirting out? So Enceladus has a central core of rock about 400 kilometres in diameter. Around that is an ocean, an entire ocean of liquid, wait for it, water. Not methane, sulfuric acid or something messy, but liquid water, and all the way around, and floating on top of that, floating entirely free, uncoupled or not joined to the rock at any stage, is this ice, which ranges in thickness from 5 to 35 kilometres. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see squirting out these jets of water, water jets. This is a diagram. This is a photograph. This is a photograph of liquid water turning into ice, squirting out of a moon, orbiting Saturn, where I am sure that there is life. The amount that's coming out is 200 kilograms a second at 2,000 kilometres per hour, and it's coming out of 4 what we call tiger stripes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're roughly 50 to a couple of hundred kilometres long. Here's another view of them. They're around the South Pole entirely. Different enhanced views of it coming out, and we know this because we sent a spacecraft out there. This spacecraft here called Cassini, and back in 1997, I was lucky enough to touch this spacecraft when the United States government made me a distinguished international foreign visitor, and I got to put on one of those bunny suits and go there, and I said, where can I touch it? And they said, you sure? I said, yes, please let me touch it, but I won't if you don't want me to. And they said, you can touch it there. So I went, oh my God, oh God. I felt like I'd touched the face of God or something. It was just amazing. It was as good as sitting in the front seat of an SR-71. And this was in 1997, and a few weeks later they then launched it, and then it went on its long trip to Saturn, spinning slowly to keep it stabilised. And finally, after a 7-year trip in 2004, it arrived. And it landed, and as it came into the solar system at high speed, that mini solar system that is Saturn, it sort of ran into this buckshot. They thought, well, that's weird, but hey, there's rings, there's Titan. Let's store that away. And the stuff that they stored away is part of the proof for life on Enceladus. Okay, we've got the warm water. We've got, because it has to be a liquid coming out. We've got the minerals, we've measured them, and these rocks, these strange rocks, the buckshot that Cassini ran into as it came in, turned out to be, when we went back and analysed the data, tiny rocks, 4 to 16 nanometres in diameter. Now, that's really small, and the geologists then were sent to work saying, how do you make this in nature? And they looked at every possible way you can get rock and then mush it through a volcano, an earthquake, vacuum, anything you want, do anything you want to it. And there's only one way that you can make rocks 4 to 16 nanometres in diameter, and that is by squirting it out through hydrothermal vents at high pressure, where hot alkaline water runs over rock or through rock. Under those conditions, where hot water that is slightly alkaline runs over or through rock, you will end up with rock particles 4 to 16 nanometres in diameter, which then get squirted out and go into the ring. And you find them here on Earth at a place called Ocean Ridge. Now, Ocean Ridge is the longest mountain chain on Earth, 80,000 kilometres long. It winds around the Earth like a seam on a tennis ball, and the Earth's circumference is only 40,000 kilometres long, and none of you will ever see the biggest mountain range on Earth because it's underwater. And here, I'm sorry, bummer. I hope there was a happy ending. So here you can see it sort of winding around here, going there. And so this one comes here and here and here, goes over there, comes here, picks up there, over here, over here, over here. And what's happening is that the Earth's crust is a thin bit here, about 6 to 100 kilometres thick. It's like a postage stamp on a soccer ball, right? But underneath is this molten rock. And thanks to the radioactive decay of uranium, potassium and thorium, there are currents of rock coming up and pushing it up. And the rock comes up and then spreads apart and makes the crust thin. Or in funny talk, it thinnifies it. And here you see it coming up, creating new crust by pushing apart between 4 and 160 millimetres per year and generating between 2 and 4 cubic kilometres of crust every year. And here it is, going around the Earth like that. And at around 500 points on this weird thing called the mid-oceanic ridge, or it's not really mid, they just call it the oceanic ridge nowadays, there are these hot spots, those little red dots. And those little red dots are where hot water comes out. And so you've got this expanse of empty ocean floor, and then suddenly, bingo, there's this hot water coming out, and there's a colony of life 100 metres across, and then blackness for the next 100 kilometres. And so the rock comes in at 3 degrees centigrade, the water, and it comes out up to 464 degrees centigrade. And that's a high enough temperature to pick up all the minerals that you need for life. Can you have life only with water? No, you've got to have sodium and potassium and zinc and blah, blah, blah. And there will be a prize for everybody who remembers everything on that graph. That was it, you had your chance. But they're the chemicals that come out, and they come out through what are called black smokers, which are at a certain temperature, and they make iron ore deposits. And all other iron ore deposits, they made Broken Hill and various lead zinc mines around the world. And then sometimes you get these white smokers. And down there are creatures of a type that are sometimes familiar and sometimes not. Down here, for example, there's crabs, whole lots of crabs of different sizes that we've never seen before, and tube worms. And these are things that grow from that big to this big. They grow 2 metres long, the diameter of my thigh, and even though they grow in size, they have neither a mouth nor an anus, and they manage to grow bigger. So this is the only life on Earth that does not need the sun in any way. You need the sun. Even if you are a pure Inuit carnivore and live on nothing but whale meat, that whale ate a whole lot of plants. All the life on Earth needs the sun, except these creatures at the bottom of the sun. And down there you find these 4 to 16 nanometre holes, these little tiny rocks, and they're found only at hydrothermal vents on Earth, which almost certainly means that there are hydrothermal vents on Enceladus. That on Enceladus there's this hot water squirting up with rocks, through the rocks, carrying minerals and generating life. So here's Enceladus. There's a thin watery layer, the ice layer on top, and at the bottom, this squirting out, squirting out, squirting out. The water squirts out through the rocky bottom, comes up, and then squirts out into the space. So the secret to life is that, yes, there will be life there. I will bet anybody in this audience that there will find bacteria there, but furthermore, besides bacteria, we will find bigger life. We will find fish and crabs and the life on Enceladus. Now, there's an interesting question you can sort of think about when you get here. On Earth, the protein, every life, all life, the proteins are left-handed and the sugars are right-handed. Talk to a chemist about what that means, but the point is, that's what they are. Now, suppose we go out there and we find the same thing. Well, that means that the life on Enceladus and here had a common cause. But if it's the opposite, oh my God, that means that there can be 2 different places where life came from. So while they're really cool here in Byron, the secret to life is not necessarily being gluten-free and lactose-free, but rather it's having water and hot rocks. And you remember, you've got a form of life that in no way needs the sun. So here's the sun, and you can see coming off at this flare, and the Earth is about that big. See that little dot there? That's the size of the Earth. And so this is really huge. And in the nearest galaxy to us, which is roughly the same size as the Earth, we've got about 300,000 million stars, which the Kepler telescope tells us must have, on average, 1.5 planets each. There's about 400,000 million planets out there. We have to find life. This is a view of another galaxy, the Sombrero galaxy, and we're kind of over there. So it's about 100,000 light years across. We're about halfway out to the edge, and you see the thickness of it. It's about 1,300 light years thick. We're about 65 light years above it. And down, I am currently with my managers here at Splendour negotiating a contract with Google that whenever you look up on Google Maps, it opens up with this map and the magic words of "you are here." We're still working on it. There's a few problems that they're going through. But if you go looking right at the very centre of our galaxy, you'll find an area called Sagittarius B2. And at Sagittarius B2, really, really close to the centre, 150 light years across, is a big cloud of molecules. How big is it? It's 10% of the entire mass of our entire galaxy is this cloud of stuff. Of course, you recognise this. I don't have to tell you what this is. I don't have to tell you what that is, because we all know it by its familiar name of goon. Yes, there's this cloud of alcohol making up 10% of the mass of our galaxy with 10 to the 27 litres. That's billions, lots, millions, trillions, 1,000 trillion. So ethanol, alcohol, different people have got different views about what this ethanol alcohol thing is. The World Bank is entirely unromantic and call it a colourless flammable liquid used to preserve fish. Really? I thought it had better uses than that. Benjamin Franklin said that it is proof that God loves us and he wants us to be happy. Now, I'll follow, for any scientists in the room, here is something incredibly important. Anything, no matter how boring, always looks better under an electron microscope, ta-da! Especially if you add colour, ta-da-da-da! But the Iranians were into beer 5,500 years ago. But it does have an unfortunate effect. It works on your balance centres and also your speech centres. So it works on your balance centres, which are over there. And the balance centres mean that you get what we call in the medical trade a wide-based gait. I will now do my cerebellar gait. So this is somebody who's really drunk. See, the legs are apart like that. And so that way they don't fall over, because if the legs are like this, they'll fall over. But also it interferes with your hearing. And you can tell when a party is really kicking off by the way that suddenly everybody starts talking louder. And at that stage, the alcohol has got to 0.03. So the alcohol affects both your balance and your hearing. So you end up with this wonderful rhyming triplet. Beer, no hear, no steer. And this is such an important thing. Now, Tom, we've got a video coming up now. And this, that I went to the trouble of going out and doing a public service announcement ad. This is a bit of alcohol dehydrogenase. Everyone has some lurking in their bodies, and it's great to take to parties. Hi! Its main job is to break down the alcohol you drink, but there's a catch. Your body makes only this much at one time. That's why you space your drinks, unlike this bloke, and drink water. You feel heaps better. So think before you drink. Oh yeah, still got it, man. Now, did anybody see David Callum last night? Isn't he a fantastic dancer? I had to be working really hard to get even part of the way to his fantastic level of dancing. I had to be using every single bit of my brain to dance that well, which brings you to this wonderful myth that's around the place that you use only 10% of your brain, which they say here in a movie called Lucy. And here I am with some of my family in Las Vegas who are doubtful about the veracity of the claim that the average human uses only 10% of their brain capacity. Imagine what you could do with 100%. So I've got a video clip that is a video clip that says this.
What happened? What did you do to my stomach? What's going on?
We've merely slipped a new package into your lower tummy.
And you're going to transport something very special to us.
No.
You speak English?
Yes.
Take me to the hospital now.
Hospital.
Somebody put a bag of drugs inside me. I need you to take it out. It's leaking.
It is estimated most human beings only use 10% of the brain's capacity. Imagine if we could access 100%. Interesting things begin to happen. Yes?
Professor Norman, my name's Lucy. I just read all your research on the human brain. It's a little rudimentary, but you're on the right track.
Thank you.
I have access to 28% of my cerebral capacity. I can feel every living thing.
Since when did you start writing Chinese?
Since an hour ago.
What happens when she reaches 100%?
I have no idea.
All this knowledge, you can unlock secrets that go beyond our universe. I'm not even sure that mankind is ready for it.
It's like all things that make me human are fading away.
I want that too. Okay, the brain. The brain is very complicated and expensive to run, weighs only 2% of your body weight, but takes up 20% of your energy, generates 20% of your heat, takes up 20% of your blood supply. The myth that you use only 10% of your brain is all the way around us. You keep on seeing it all the time in the motivational speakers, and they say that, well, you're only using 10%, but if you can use 100%, well, surely you're going to win a Nobel Prize, an Olympic gold medal, etc., 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 etc. And it began way back with this guy here, William James, who, besides being a boring older fart with a beard, once was a young man who painted pictures. And here he is, back with the beard again, and he was saying to another person, he says, Royce, you're being photographed. Look out, I say, and then here's the magic words, damn the absolute. So from that phrase, damn the absolute, you can pick out what his job is, and his job in life was not only being a philosopher, but everything else that began with P. So he was a philosopher, a psychologist, and a physician, and a professor. And he wrote a book called The Energies of Men, and this is how close he came to saying we use only 10% of our brain. This is the exact quote, and the only quote where he made any reference. He said, we are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. Mental and physical, no numbers there at all. Along comes this guy here who's trying to find out where does memory exist. And so he starts working with rats in the 1920s, and he trained rats to run through a maze, and then he started removing more and more of their brains to see how well they remembered stuff. And basically he found that memory is not stored in any one single place, it's all over the brain. And if you removed any bit of the brain, you damage their memory. Maybe their cannabis levels were low, I don't know. Anyway, so if you remove any there, it damages. This then went into the media. He never said 10%. This then went into the media. By the way, he never removed 90% of a brain and saw they went fine. And it went into the media, and they said, oh, they only need 10% of their brain. He didn't say it. James didn't say it. The media made it up. And so the rats did fine until they had never said. Then it went to the next stage. Dale Carnegie, who wrote the How to Win Friends and Influence People, very popular in the 1930s. And Lowell Thomas, who was an adventurer explorer, wrote a foreword, and he was the guy who made up the lie. Professor William James of Harvard used to say that the average person develops only 10% of his latent mental capability. If you went through and read every single word that Professor William James said, you would never find it. That was the lie, which then spread around the world. Now, this is the reason. I'll show you the reason why it is impossible to use 100% of any body organ, and I'll show you with the example of the muscle. Here is somebody who is using 100% of their muscles, and they are suffering from tetanus. By the way, get vaccinated against tetanus. And you'll see over here, the muscles on the front of the thigh are going as strongly as they can, but so are the ones on the back, but the ones on the back are a bit stronger, so he's bent into an arch. The muscles in the bicep are on full, but they're bigger than the ones in the triceps, so his arms are like this. He can't breathe. He's going to die. He is using every single muscle flat out all the time, and he is about to die. Get vaccinated. Did I mention that? So you don't use all your muscles all the time, every second, but over a day you'll get to use all of them. And with the brain, you only use this percentage and that percentage, but eventually over a full day you'll get to use all of your brain. But there are two exceptions. The first exception is to do with a condition called hydro, which means water, cephalus, meaning brain. And so it happens to a small percentage of babies, and we've got good technologies for it in the Western countries, and it's related to the fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, which flows around your blood and your spinal cord, or either you're making too much of it or you're absorbing too little of it. And usually, but not always, usually, because the baby's brain is fairly plastic, it makes the brain a little bit bigger, and the brain meat gets squashed. Let me explain what I mean by the brain meat. So on the outside here, you've got the skull, then you've got what I charmingly call the brain meat, that sort of orangey stuff, and then there's this hollow chamber in here called the ventricles, and that sort of is where you've got the brain meat, where you do your thinking. And this bluey stuff, well, that's full of this cerebrospinal fluid that is constantly pumping around your brain. The next pictures are a little bit gory, so you might want to shut your eyes. This is somebody who did not have the benefit of modern technology that we have in Western countries. Okay, you can open your eyes again. So over here, you've got 45 millimetres of brain meat on average that you do your thinking with, except for one case. One, that's all we got. And this here is a photo, I'll bring it all together now, of the very first CAT scanner ever built. Built by, who was it, EMI, the record company, back in the 60s, I think it was. And it was that machine which showed you a case where you don't need the 45 millimetres of brain. So with the brain, the normally it's 45 millimetres thick. This man, he had 1 millimetre of brain meat. Not 45, 1. His skull was normal size. He had 1 millimetre of brain meat. And this guy had a first class honours and an IQ of 126 and helped invent the first CAT scanner. And once he said, hey, it's going now, can we try it out on me? And they said, oh my God, what's in your skull? You got nothing. So that does not prove that you don't need most of your brain. What it does show is that sometimes, and we still don't know why, even if you have a remarkably serious trauma, you can still recover, and in his case, recover with apparently no abnormalities at all. That's really, really rare. How many cases have we got? 1 on the whole planet. The second case is that you can kind of make your brain a little bit better with magnetic fields, and this is a tricky thing, and you can do it on the internet and don't do it. Transcranial, which means trans, across, cranial, the brain, magnetic stimulation. You stimulate the brain with magnetic fields coming here, or you can have 2 of them if you like, and it replaces ECT because you don't have to give as high voltages. It also works in some cases for depression and migraine. This is the disadvantage. The disadvantage is that if you have it happening to you, suddenly you can't work out a bus timetable. I have to take the bus from here to there. Hang on, I can't read the timetable. The numbers are just blurring. But you want to take the bus in half an hour. When's half an hour? Well, it's 3 o'clock. Oh, well, I can't get to 3:30. Okay, right. So you lose the ability to organise stuff, but suddenly, for the next 45 minutes, you can draw a horse like you have never drawn anything in your entire life. Absolutely amazing and astonishing how well you can do it. So the point is that we do use all of our brains all the time, but not all at once. Let me just say that again. We do use all of our brains, practically all of us. And what happened in 2016 was basically our fault. You see, what happened was that 2016 was the year in which, in the publishing industry, the most popular form of adult literature was the adult colouring in book. How did Trump get involved? Sorry, don't bother me, I'm colouring in. And so that's how he came in. Now, don't blame him. It's not his fault either. Because as Mao Zedong said, the gorilla, not the one in the trees, but the freedom fighter, the gorilla swims in the population of the people as the fish swims in the ocean. He arose from the population of the American people. Let's have a look at that population. And the Australian population is probably similar. I haven't got the statistics, but I reckon they're fairly similar. So in America, which I don't have the Australian statistics for, but I'm not picking on Americans, 4% of Americans deny that smoking is harmful. 6% deny that any mental disorder can be caused by something physical or chemical or electrical or a lump inside your brain, rather that you've been possessed by the devil or that you are weak. That's the problem, you're weak and you just need to toughen up, man up, woman up, and get tougher. 70% of Americans, and this came through a few weeks ago, 7% of Americans do accept that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. 8% deny that DNA exists. What's wrong with DNA? What's it ever done to anybody, right? 15% that deny that childhood vaccines work and that they're overwhelmingly safe. 25%, this is a weird one. This has been done by Science magazine over the last 40 years. The number varies from 22 to about 28%, but 1/4 of Americans, and it's not a trick question, it's a straightforward question, 1/4 of Americans deny that the Earth goes around the sun. 40% of Americans deny that the global warming exists, that we cause it, that's going to be expensive to fix up. They deny that the Earth is older than 10,000 years. They deny that evolution is real, even though they've heard of antibiotics no longer working because the bacteria evolve resistance, and the same with the pesticides. And 40% deny that radiocarbon dating is accurate, and 51%, even though they've got zero training in astrophysics, cosmology, or astronomy, they deny that the Big Bang ever happened. And we've got a similar situation here in Australia where a senator goes to a healthy part of the reef and says, I went to this bit of the reef, I dived down, I illegally picked up a bit of coral, it looks healthy, therefore there's no climate change. And then she goes on to say that with regard from the world-leading scientists who say the opposite, that we can't have these lies put across by people with their own agendas. On the other hand, we have Nature magazine showing pictures, and here you can see before and after, before and after, before and after. Reefs under threat, and this is not just, hey, we were feeling bored, so we just whipped off this paper. This is 2 decades of work summarised from thousands of scientists around the world. And these coral reefs are important because coral reefs occupy only 1/10 of 1% of the surface area of the oceans, but they generate 25% of all the tonnage of fish that we get from the oceans. The Great Barrier Reef, well, we lost half of it in that window. We're losing another 25% now, and it's going to get worse with these bleachings that happen. Now, what is this thing that we call coral? Well, it's something that does not have lungs or a heart, no respiratory or cardiovascular system, but what is it? Is it a plant? No, it is an animal with a hard shell that survives only because it's been invaded by somebody. So here you can see the coral. Here is the coral. Now notice this, kids. Over here is its mouth, which is where its bum is. So it eats through its bum, or it defecates through, or vomits through its mouth. Pick one. And so this is the living soft animal with the tentacles, and all this is hard coral. And if you go in there and look inside, you'll see these little dots, and they're really weird, these little dots. They are the invaders. They're algae that do photosynthesis. They've got a fancy name, and in each cubic centimetre there's 1 million of these guys, and these are absolutely essential for the coral to survive. The coral gives to these little guys, it gives them carbon dioxide and methane and sodium and potassium and nitrogen and all that other sort of stuff, and in return the algae give back all of this sort of stuff, so they need each other. They live off each other's waste products. And they supply 90% of the metabolic needs of the coral. The coral can't survive without them. They're absolutely essential. And here's weird stuff about them. Firstly, they've got 100 times more DNA than we humans have. The coral. These little guys, there's 1 million of them in every cubic centimetre. Secondly, you've probably heard about DNA, and it's how it's got 4 rungs on the ladder of life, A, T, C and G. All the life on Earth has 4 rungs to the DNA ladder of life, except for coral, which has got 5. Go figure. Nobody knows why. And it does photosynthesis by a method that no other plant does. We've got no idea why. It's really weird. And they give the brownish colour to the coral, which keeps it alive. And when there's stress, the coral will say, I've got to survive. I can't afford to give you anything. I'm giving you nothing. I'm booting you out. They're gone. I'll survive for 1 day longer and then I'll die. So it's a good short-term plan, but long-term the coral dies. It can recover sometimes, but not always. So we have this scientific paper in Nature called Coral Reef, Global Warming and Recurrent Bleachings of Corals. And to write this paper took thousands of people who summarised all the work, and they even then, in this time window, they flew across the Great Barrier Reef. This was the end of the 20 years of work. And then they aerially surveyed it and said, okay, this is what we're seeing now. And to make sure that what they saw was correct, they also put 100 divers into the water who then said, well, where you said it was actually bleaching, you were right. So they said that this is right and it is really bleaching. So on one hand, we've got Pauline Hanson saying, nah, it's not bleaching. On the other hand, we have 20 years worth of work from scientists saying that it is, and they don't get accepted. Why? Is it just too many adult colouring in books by adults who don't care? Or is it that we don't have enough data? Now, it's hard to get enough data into people's minds. This is the fastest way to shift data known to the human race in the year 2017. A truck. Yeah, I know, follow me on this one. It is the fastest way to shift data if you've got a lot of data. And take an example of somebody like DJI, a company that stores satellite imagery on the cloud. We'll get to that in a moment. And they've got 100,000 terabytes of data that they've built up since 1992. That is a huge amount of data. Your home machine is maybe half a terabyte to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 terabytes. This is 100,000 terabytes of data. And when you want to go looking for something, you want to find the village that's flooded. You want to check out tree cover over 5 years. And while you want 1 megabyte of data, they've got to have available on the cloud everything, which turns out to be 100,000 million megabytes of data. And the story began back in 2015 when Amazon realised that people wanted to have their data stored on the cloud, and they sent them something called a snowball, which would encrypt the data. It's a box about the size of a travelling bag, and you put your data in there, it gets encrypted. They don't have paper labels, they've got little Kindles for labels. It's about the size of these suitcases, and people fell in love with them, and they did all these selfies. And then that evolved from the snowball to the confusingly named snowmobile, which in 2016 is the fastest way to shift data in bulk anywhere across the planet. So you open up the back of it, and it's a truck, and there's a container, and you can see stuff over here and stuff over there, and there's fire suppression and water, 350 kilowatts of power. So besides the engine, the 350 kilowatt engine that makes the truck go down the road, there's another engine of the same size whose only job is to keep an absolute shirtload of hard drives spinning and cool, and there's multiple 40 gigabit connections which give you 1 terabit a second. So you drive it up to somebody and they fill it with their 100,000 terabytes, their 100,000 million megabytes. It takes about a week. And then the truck drives across country, and it turns out to be faster than optic fibre. Because with optic fibre, you can probably get 1 gigabit a second, which means if you want to put your 100,000 terabits in there, it's about 30 years. But if you put it into a truck, drive it across country, that's 5,000 gigabits a second travelling, 2 weeks to fill it. It drops it down by the time you average it out to 1,000 times faster, which means instead of needing 30 years to transfer all your data, you need several weeks. And if you want to go for the old style security, because remember data is worth money, you can hire, this is America, an armed guard with as many guns as you want. This is the fastest that we had in 2017. But in 2028 it'll be obsolete because of this wonderful Australian African endeavour. You can see these dishes here, you can see these guys here. These are part of what we call the SKA, the Square Kilometre Array, an array of radio telescope dishes with a total area of 1 square kilometre, the biggest radio telescope ever built in the history of the human race, with a total area of 1 square kilometre. And when they start their serious downloading of data in 1 decade, in 1 second, they will download as much data as was generated in the year 2016 across the entire internet in 1 second. And we have no idea of how to take that data down or to store it, but in the next 10 years we will solve that problem. Until then, the information superhighway is basically a truck like this. Mind you, in some parts of the world they got better than 1 gigabyte. They got over here in Germany with CERN, the 100 gigabits a second. And then you look inside in the factories, the big cloud things, and you suddenly realise that there's all these machines spinning away, and you see words like storage racks, disks, hard drives. How dirty is your data? It turns out that your data is dirty. So you'd think that, if it's digital, it must be clean. Because if I'm going to work from home, I'm just sort of typing away and having some leaded up green tea. Whereas if I'm going to go to work, I'm going to have to get in my car and drive there and burn hydrocarbons and put rubber on the road and all that sort of stuff. Surely it is cleaner being digital because you're not shifting mass. All you're doing is shifting these weightless bits. Well, just to make one desktop computer takes 1/4 ton of fossil fuel and 1.5 tons of water. And then if you want to watch on your smartphone a 1-hour video, so you're watching the video, your battery hardly goes down at all, but to get that data to you took more energy than it takes to run a refrigerator for a week. That's how much energy it takes. So this is where you watch movies, you do your health, you do everything in the world happens there, and every activity that you do uses hundreds of computers spread out across the world. When you send an SMS to somebody, meet you at the vajazzling tent over there, what happens is that gets broken up into packets, and some of the packets go via Vladivostok, some go via New Zealand, some go via Sydney, they all meet up. And it's amazing that it still works. It's an amazing machine. So the cloud is not this diffuse, fluffy, white, clean, vaporous entity. This is the Google. This is a small part of the cooling storage tanks at a Google data center in Belgium. And when you go inside, you see all of these video paths, the optical paths, the RJ45s, every sort of connector with hard drives spinning, making a lot of noise. Mate, it's not a diffuse entity. It's these huge buildings all around the world which cost $1 billion to make, and 24 hours a day are chewing up power at 100 megawatts. In the USA, the data centers use up 3% of the entire energy budget, and they normally like to have these data centers in places that are cold, so that way you don't have to provide too much cooling, but stable both in terms of earthquakes and politically. Then suddenly Netflix turns up, and by itself, Netflix is 1/3 of all the internet traffic in the United States. It comes to Australia in 2015, and within 2 weeks it's 15% extra on the internet traffic. If the cloud was a country by itself, it would be the 6th biggest country in the world in terms of electricity consumption. And when you move these buildings into a local community, you get all sorts of flexing muscle and pushing the local community down. Microsoft is thinking about putting them on the ocean floor, because how can we possibly pollute the oceans? Because the oceans are infinitely large, and throwing a bit of extra heat wouldn't hurt anything at all. In the case of India in 2011, they had 300,000 mobile phone towers. That's good. But then they didn't have a reliable electricity commission to 60% of them, only 40%, which meant they burnt up 2 billion litres of fuel, which meant they were the 6th biggest user of diesel after rail, which meant that they counted for 2% of all of India's greenhouse emissions. So we can build a greener internet. Let me introduce you to an economic term called a hidden externality. Talk to an economist about it. So you've got the coal burning, and sure, it makes electricity, which you want. It makes carbon dioxide. Luckily that's invisible, so you can pretend it doesn't happen. But also heavy metals like mercury. And the health costs alone from the United States are $0.4 trillion per year in health costs, which are not covered by the generators of electricity or the burners of coal, but by the people who suffer the health effects. Perfect example of the hidden externality. The NSA site, where they're storing all their data, it uses 6,500 tonnes of water every day. And the raw materials come into our electronics, in some cases virtually by slave labour in different parts of the world. Then we create the e-waste. So this thing that we call the clean cloud, mate, it ain't that clean. Really, it's a bit of a stormy mess. And the reason that it's a stormy mess is that we don't see it. It's not clear in front, it's somewhere else. Like we don't see stuff here. Like, can you see the difference between that photo and that photo? Anybody pick the difference? A, B, A, B. Anybody pick the difference? What's that, sorry? The photo, yeah, okay, so over here you got this photo. See that photo? There's hardly any difference. But that photo has a major effect upon human behaviour. It just says staff meeting, but look at what's there. Either you've got flowers or you've got eyes. And this is the basis of a paper which I got the attention of in email out, which is called Big Brother Eyes Encourage Honesty. And then I went to the original literature, as you should always do, even if it costs $30. And it says cues of being watched, which is fancy talk for we got some photographs of eyes and we put them on the wall. Enhanced cooperation, I'll explain in a second. A real world setting is the tea room. So for 10 weeks, they showed either flowers, eyes, flowers, eyes, flowers, eyes, flowers, eyes in the tea room, and they plotted how much money went into the honesty tea box. Whenever there were eyes, more money went into the honesty tea box. People paid nearly 3 times as much when there were the honesty eyes staring at them. So this brings you to the weird thing that with humans, we're different from the animals. If you're an animal and you're staring at another animal, one of you's got to back down or you've got to have a fight. But with humans, it's a mark of honesty. But we all know that you can fake a brave gaze. Now, the only honest declaration of love is in the kiss. And that's where you find love in its purest form. And here's a scientific paper talking about it. And you think, what the heck are they talking about? Well, neonatal. Now, neonatal means just when the baby's been born in the first month of life or so. A right side preference. Now, look, any of you who have got friends who have got new babies, here's a great thing you can do. It's so funny. Look, they'll piss themselves laughing. So what you do is after they've spent about 5 hours putting the baby to sleep, sneak up quietly behind the baby and shout really loudly. And this is what happens. In 90% of cases, when the baby wakes up, it does this. It looks to the right. And in 10% of cases, it looks to the left. Once you explain it to the parents, they'll piss themselves laughing. Honestly, they'll love it. And look in the photograph, you'll see that they're turning their heads to the right. And so this is the paper about kissing and how it comes through into later life. Now, we've been kissing for a long time. In the old days, there weren't enough Christians to go around, so they said, whenever you meet another one, kiss, have a baby, blah, 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 blah. And so that's how it goes there. Eskimos and Polynesians don't actually kiss at all. In Southeast India, they have a case where they come up to another person and they put their nose up against their cheek and then they sort of go and they sniff up all of the vapours. There are crimes of kissing. In Indiana, a man with a moustache still is not allowed to kiss humans. You're only allowed to kiss your wife in Hartford on Sundays. Death penalty in Naples. Getting back to the paper, Ona Göttingen. Now, Ona Göttingen, he is the go-to left-right scientist in the whole world. He was the guy who discovered that birds look for food with one eye, but for threats with the other eye. And he happened to be stuck in an airport and he observed, he was basically the guy with the long brown overcoat and the big hat going, kiss, no kiss, kiss. So he ended up getting stuck in the airport and he said, well, look, I see these people coming towards each other. Hey, they're tipping their heads and I'm a left-right scientist, I should check this out. So let's get scientific. Firstly, they can't have any luggage that they're towing behind them because that'll twist their bodies and they'll want to kiss this way anyway. And then secondly, you've got to have genuine lip-to-lip, none of this air kiss stuff. You've got to have their faces coming in, a big kiss. You've got to have an obvious direction of tilting and then you end up with this. And what do you find when you survey a lot of people? 2 out of 3 people tip their head to the right. 2 out of 3 tip their heads to the right as to the left. Why do we kiss? Well, back in the old days, you'd do breastfeeding as a baby and you'd associate food with comfort and love, and there's all these nerve endings for pleasure, so you'd think lips can give me pleasure, so I might try kissing somebody because of that pleasure centre thing. Secondly, there's this whole thing about chewing food. Like, so when my little boy, I did this experiment with my little boy after he was born, so at some stage they lose their teeth and you start saying, well, kid, here's a dinosaur steak. Yeah, look, I'm sorry you haven't got any teeth, but we're not breastfeeding you anymore. So what you do is you get the food and you chew it. This is before they invented, mashed up meat. You chew it in your mouth and you come to your little baby and go, and you drop it in and they go, oh, thank you, Daddy. And everybody goes, you're a freako, man. Back off. I'm calling docs. So number 3, you get close enough to somebody and say, darling, why do you smell of cheap Woolworths perfume when you didn't 2 hours ago? The immune system, you can pick up the smell of somebody who has the opposite immune smell, so that if they are resistant to diseases ABC, which comes out through their smell, and you're resistant to diseases XYZ, you find their smell attractive, and so then you can make babies. And then there's the hippie thing, which is just plain bull dust, you know. The main point I want to point out is that two things here. This is very important. Number one, we do not know why we kiss, number one, but we do it wrongly. And number two, it's a goddamn adverb. It is not an adjective. You do not kiss wrong, you kiss wrongly. Sorry, I just had to get that out. I feel better now. And so you've got some people coming in for the kiss, and you've got 3 males. 2 of them will tip their heads to the right. You've got a couple of females. 2 of them will tip their heads to the right. And happily, and this is just lovely, they match up. And the lefty matches up with the lefty. Oh, so beautiful. But look at these when the lefties match up with the righties. And we've got this situation where 5 out of 9 kisses are okay, the first time you come in for a kiss. 5 out of 9 are okay. 4 out of 9 are not okay. And I'm just thinking of the young people. By the way, the stash tin is over there for the young people. The young people coming in for the first kiss, and they're so beautiful and they're so lacking in confidence, and they bang their foreheads against each other. Sorry, I don't know what I was doing, and they go somewhere else. And this is a cover-up. We're not teaching people how to kiss properly. This is a cover-up that goes past the parents, past the local high school, past the Minister for Education in your state. This goes right to the top, past the Federal Minister for Education, past the people who really run Australia. This goes to the top, to the people who run Australia. That's how high the cover-up goes. And we've got to learn to kiss properly. I have learned by following scientific literature how to kiss properly. And I think that Rupert has got some elements of good in him, and we can teach him the path to enlightenment. And so he can learn to kiss properly. Like, why is it that when you look at a dog, they always tip their head to the right and they look so cute? And is it to look cute? Well, somebody went looking and doing the science on it, and they actually did a bit of a survey. So I've got an experiment that I'd like you to do, which doesn't involve being nice to the person next to you. You just look at them and then you stop looking at them. So I'll explain it to you first. What you do is you make a fist, you put the fist on your nose, you then turn around and look at the person, you think, can I see your whole face or not? And then you're out of it. Okay, so just try it, make a fist, and then you'll find that in a majority of cases, you can't see the fist, you can't see their face if you've got this big schnozzle in front of you, right? So the theory was the big schnozzle stops them from seeing you, so they tip their head. So it's a self-reported study. Oh my God, self-reported. What sort of crap is that? At least he had a decent sample size. And then he had big fancy words like brachiocephalic, which means a flathead. He had 186 of them where half the dogs tilt. Hang on. If they've got flat noses and they tip their heads and half of them do it, why are the other half doing it if they can still see what's going on? And then an unknown number, then he uses a fancy word to try and get some sciencey words in it. And then when he rates them on a scale, instead of having, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of how much they're tilting, he gets 1, 2, 3, like never, seldom, occasionally, and that's a 0. And then he turns frequently, never, most of the time into a 1. This is crap science. What you need is high quality science. And high quality science gives you an insight into reality. And we are living in a world where we do not know, for example, how to use the second most common legal drug, alcohol. I'll show you. So think about this, rum and cola. Rum and cola. Our society is drenched in cola, but in alcohol, but we don't know the science of it. Now, I'll tell you how by a story. So we were in Mumbai, in India, and Dickie was having a party. You know Dickie, your mate Dickie? Richard Branson? Yeah, anyway, Dickie was launching a $5 billion phone network, and we decided to crash the party. And this is how you gate crash parties. There's various ways to do it. One is to divide and conquer. One person engages the rent-a-cop, the other person walks through slowly. Another way that works for me is that you look for the rent-a-cop and you start heading for the rent-a-cop and you go for them, you smile, and you go straight for the rent-a-cop and you say, family. Don't put a verb in there because you might be telling a lie and you don't want to do that. And just say family. And they say, are you related to Sir Richard Branson? And you just say family. You're not. That's not a verb. Yeah, right, okay. And so we do not know the science of alcohol because I looked around, I couldn't work out what was wrong. There was something weird. $5 billion. him doing a stunt off a building, parachutes, helicopters, everything. There was no alcohol. There were sweet Indian drinks. And at that moment, I suddenly thought, we're launching a $5 billion phone network and there's no alcohol. Our society is drenched in alcohol, but we do not know how to use it. We do not know the difference between rum and diet cola and rum and regular cola. They've got the same amount of alcohol and one will get you drunker. And here's the answer. D for diet, D for drunker. How many people knew that? See, you're good. You're my new best friends forever. The rest of you, we are all gathering towards the light. So, diet drinks get you drunker. How come everybody is not taught this in Australia? So, it's because of different amounts of energy. Here is the scientific paper that deals with this. Artificially sweetened versus regular mixes increase gastric emptying and alcohol absorption. And so if you look 3 rum and diet colas, well, the alcohol has a certain amount of energy. It's around 225 calories. There's no sugar in it. If you have the rum and regular cola with sugar, you have, oh, by the way, they've got 65 grams of sugar, which by coincidence is the average consumption of sugar around the world. End of diversion, back to our story, right? So if you have 3 rum and regular colas, you have twice as much energy because the sugar has as much energy as the alcohol. And I didn't know this until I went to, even in medical school, I only learned this when I did this story, that your stomach here, the organ called the stomach, pushes stuff into the duodenum, so named duodenum, because it's as long as 12 fingers, duodenum. It pushes its contents into the duodenum at a specific rate of 2 to 3 kilocalories per minute, and the longer the alcohol, diet drink, sugar drink, whatever it is, mix stays in your stomach, the more it can be attacked by the acids, the more it can be broken down, the less that it goes through. And here you see the graph. 2 identical twins I've just made up are at a party, and one of them has 3 rum and regular colas. They go up to 0.03, and then they come down again. They drive home. They're tested by the cops. It's wonderful. Good evening, sir or madam. Have a nice day. The other one has the same amount of food, identical twin, has 3 rum and it has the diet colas, goes up to 0.05. Goes up to 0.05, is over the limit, gets busted by the cops on the way home, ends up getting picked up, going into the jail system, going into a prison, getting really good friends with the person next to them in the prison cell, getting tattooed love and hate on their knuckles, get let out after 4 years, and at the end of the day, and this could have happened to me, at the end of the day, they end up outside your kids' kindergarten school with a big fat tummy and a big beard selling methamphetamine and cocaine to your children because they did not know that diet drinks get you drunker. And this could have happened to me. And so this is the sort of thing that could have happened, but it didn't, and that's why I'm here at Splendour in the Grass. So everything I've talked about so far has been totally true, and if it wasn't, it should have been, and if it should have been, it doesn't matter, because under the Goods and Services Act, I'm not actually here. Thank you very much. Time for questions. Lights up. Now we have our famous volunteer. Now this is the catch box, and you just catch it and switch off the microphone in the air, and then when it lands, it stops, the microphone goes on. So speak into, is it this bit here? Thank you. So who wants the first question? The answer to the first question is my wife makes my shirts. Thank you very much, darling. I am but a puppet for her. 3 hours, over here is one. 3 hours with a 4th thread overlocker and differential feed. We're not playing. Oh, well caught, sir. Okay, and your question, please. And big lights, yes, thank you.
What were you going to tell us about déjà vu?
About déjà vu? Well, déjà vu is when your brain is sort of leaking stuff. I didn't have time to go into it. So it's to do with reality. The bottom line is that the hippies got it right. Reality is for people who can't handle drugs, right? Now, there's so much information coming in, your brain has to filter it down. It has to throw away most of it. So by the time, from light landing on my retina, there's a killer dinosaur out there, right? Light lands on my retina, it goes from the 2 eyes, in the retinas itself, it gets processed. In the retina, it gets processed, and already my retina knows the difference between a bar this way and a bar that way, and whether it's white on a black background or vice versa. So a lot of processing happens in the retina. Then it goes to the optic chiasm, there's a crossover, over to the Brodmann's areas 18 and 19 to the back of the skull, little areas the size of the baby's clenched fist, and gets turned into full, glorious, wraparound colour vision after 3 1/10 of a second. That's a long time if there's a killer dinosaur coming for you. So, around here, a low-resolution feed is taken off, and it's scanned for information. Dinosaurs, killer washing machine, stove, you're cool. And that information is then thrown away. What happens in déjà vu is that it leaks through into consciousness. So that happens at 1/10 of a second, 3/10 of a second, 1/10 of a second, 3/10 of a second. So you go up to a corner and you look up there and you think, I knew there was going to be a blue car coming around the corner. That's leaking through into consciousness. That explanation works for that. Just to show we don't really know what's going on, you can have déjà vu in smell. No idea. Okay, next question. One down here at the front. So turn around, sir, to catch your beautiful orange thing. Whoa, well done. Yep.
So when you were talking about the cloud and everything,
Talk louder. Yep.
So when you actually delete something off of a device or something, where does that actually go? Like, do you know where it goes?
Your data gets broken into packets. So you might store a photo, 1 megabyte, and it gets broken down into, I don't know how many packets, maybe a quarter of a million, 100,000 packets. There's 10 bits to a packet. Each packet has the address from where it came and the address where it's supposed to go. It then gets launched onto the internet. It goes to a router, and the router says, I know where you came. I think the best way to get to where you want to go is over that way. So some of them go via Vladivostok or whatever, and they all end up on a spinning hard drive. There are these $1 billion buildings where the hard drives are spinning 24 hours a day. So and these are around the world, usually in cold areas where it's stable. Do you have a follow-up question on that, or is that enough of an answer? Next bit, yep.
Like on your phone, if you have something on your phone and it's deleted, is it gone or is it go somewhere? Like
Okay, second question. Yeah. When you delete data on your phone, you do not truly delete it. Imagine you've got a book. The book is the biography of your family, and you came to Australia here, you lived here, you lived here, you lived here, and there's a table of contents, maybe 3 pages at the front, and then there's everything about your family in the rest of the book. When you delete data, what you do is you rip out the table of contents. And all that other stuff there, you can write on it, but it's not lost. It will be lost when you write on it. And so you can either delete data by delete data, mate, they can get it back. You can write over it once, or 7 times, or 35 times. 35 times is military grade. So follow that up on Wikipedia. And the people who are talking about encryption, how's that? Sulet. And the other person, Barry Anderson and Chris Gatfield, and Sulet Duffield, I think, they're the ones who really know all this stuff. So your data is still there. If you get rid of your phone, does it truly get encrypted? I've got rid of a whole bunch of old phones for recycling, and I went through set to factory reset, and I did it 7 times. Am I doing it any better? I think what I have to do is fill the whole data bank with songs, which then writes over the old data, and then wipe it. I think that's the only way to really get rid of your data. The Australian military get rid of their data by the following method. They take the hard drives out of their computers. They then open up the hard drives and they find the spinning discs. They then put the spinning discs up to a grinding wheel. They then turn it into powder. Sorry to do that to you, Tom. They turn it into powder. They then mix the powder in with the concrete of the new building they're building. You want to go there and find those little bits of powder and reconstruct them, you go for it, man. Okay, another question? Yeah, toss away.
All right. There.
Oh, whoa, nicely caught. Yes, please, next question.
You talked about breaking the seal. Is
Yes.
there a way to train that?
No. 200 mils of beer in, 320 out. You're putting more into your bladder than it can handle. Bladder capacity, 400 to 700 mils kind of range. As it goes, it's sort of like a folded organ, like a piano chord, and it opens and it opens and it opens. And at each stage, it says, mate, you might want to go soon. You might want to go soon, until finally, you got to go now or just urinate on the floor, right? And so when you're at 700 mils, if you hold, all you're going to do is cause retro flow into your kidneys, pyelonephritis. No, you don't want to go that pathway. Just go. It's okay. Okay, another question. Throw it. Oh my God, we've got anarchy. We've got anarchy. The audience is asking their own questions. Oh, and it's a perfectly safe one when you put it back inside. Thank you. Yep. Talk loudly into it.
When a baby drops a dummy and the parent picks it up and sucks it to clean it, does that actually do anything, or does it make it worse for the baby to then suck back on?
If it's your first baby under the age of 3 months, mate, you just take that thing and burn it, and then you sterilise it. By the time they get to either a year and a half with your first baby, love you too. When you come to your first baby, about a year and a half, or your second baby, mate, if you see them eating a shoe, you say, hey kid, I'm going to wear that, and you don't worry about it one bit. So it's sort of variable. A little bit of germ is good, too much is bad. So, but too much can be definitely bad. I won't bring the mood down by telling you about too much. So a little bit, just suck on it yourself, clean, that's fine. Ish, yeah. Unless it's got mercury-ish. Okay, another question? Okay, chuck it over that way. Way! And catch and talk loudly into the microphone, yep.
I've had a question for a while, and it's why are reptiles cold and why are mammals warm? Like, how does it happen? Because I've had a discussion with my veterinary colleagues, and we think it's metabolic rates. However, if it is, why aren't reptiles warm like us?
You can look at it from the evolutionary biology point of view, which is that it takes a lot of energy to keep your temperature warm. But if you're running at 37 degrees C, whether it's daytime or nighttime, you can run away from a big predator, or you can catch and kill something that's small. Whereas if you're a reptile, you've got a narrow window, and the rest of the time, mate, you just veg out. So it sort of swings and roundabouts, and don't knock the vegging out one. Reptiles are very successful in their own ecological niches. Then it's related to metabolic rate, and I've always tried to find out where the heat comes from, and this bothered the heck out of me, and I've read a paper, and I haven't been following it through because basically I spend my life drinking cocktails with umbrellas, and then the rest of the time I scratch my belly. But this paper said mitochondria. You know mitochondria? Yes. Okay, the background for everybody who doesn't know about mitochondria. Earth formed 4.7 billion years ago. 2 billion years ago, the great oxygenation event, when photosynthesis got invented, and this poisonous toxic gas called oxygen started flooding into the atmosphere. Everybody died except for the photosynthetic plants and the people who could evolve out of it. The mitochondria couldn't evolve. And what they did was they jumped inside the cells of the creatures that could evolve, the plants, and they stayed there. And the deal is this: both the plants and us, we give them a low oxygen environment. Every now and then we throw oxygen at them and they think, God damn, I hate this, I will make for you an energy chemical called ATP. Slight diversion. In our society, if you want to get glittered up or have food, you've got to spend money. In your body, if you want to move an eye, if you want to pump blood, if your kidneys want to filter, at any activity that you do, there's an equivalent of money, which is that you turn a chemical with 3 phosphates into 2. The third phosphate is held on just lightly. Just give it a kiss. Falls off. Huge amount of energy released. The mitochondria do that job. Okay, so that was a second nested layer. Now I'm coming back. So the mitochondria are in our cells, and I read a paper. Are you a biologically trainee type person?
I'm a vet nurse, but I love biology.
Okay, this is going to blow your mind. Okay. Mitochondria have been measured. The mitochondria in your body run at 50 degrees centigrade. What? Exactly. I've got to read up and turn it into a story. It'll only take me 20 hours. But I think that's where the heat might come from. I've tried asking exercise physiologists on it, and they say it's from your metabolic rate. I would say, but where does the heat come from? It might be the mitochondria, I don't know. Okay. So I definitely don't know. Okay?
Thank you.
Always glad to help with not knowing anything. Another question from anybody? One down here at the front. Oh, yeah. So do you want to catch it as an intermediate person? And here comes the intermediate catcher. Way, nicely course, and then a thrower. Thank you. Now we're heading towards 4 o'clock, so you might want to head off to the next band soon. Yep, next question. So bring it up close to your mouth.
Yeah, why do you think that humanity feels it needs to have religion? What does science have to say about that?
There's a series of articles about it in the New Scientist. We're talking religion, and they lead on to other studies. And it does seem that if you're in a smaller group of people, having some sort of poorly defined boss of everything helps the group stay cohesive. And then you can keep that in your brain and work perfectly well. So in the case of where I am at the University of Sydney in the School of Physics, one of our top relativists, hey, how's that? That's somebody who is the go-to person for relativity, knows more about relativity than anybody else, and is a minister of religion. When they're a minister of religion, mate, I don't need proof, I just believe. When they're a scientist, mate, I don't care about belief, give me the proof. They're orthogonal, they never cross, they're at right angles to each other.
One's faith-based and the other is needs proof.
Yeah, so one is faith-based, one is proof, and they don't hurt. Some people, it helps an awful lot, some it doesn't. But then you can't blame the religion itself, because look at a truck. You can carry a small nuclear weapon or vegetables, especially eggplants. Anybody cooking any crispy eggplant? I love crispy eggplant. Yeah, so the religion itself is sort of neutral. It's how it's sort of used by people, and it can help people and it can also hold them back. Yeah, that was a wussy answer if I've ever heard one. Over behind, yeah, you make the decision. Oh, it's so cool bouncing that thing around. Yep.
Just on the topic of relativity.
Relativity.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask if. Say an extraterrestrial planet, if the orbital velocity or the gravitational field that it experiences, would that affect the development of life on that planet?
Yes, if it's
affect like the rates at which it evolves?
Sure, time slows down the higher the gravity. And so in that movie Interstellar, they've got a planet that's really close to a black hole, and so I think a few weeks there is 11 years back on Earth. So it would just take longer by the rest of the universe, but relative to itself, in its own inertial frame of reference, everything's just normal. But you're watching them and they're going so slowly. And so in the case of the Large Hadron Collider, which let me point out cost less than 3 American B-2 bombers, and if we live in a society where you say something that cost almost as much, but not quite, as 3 warplanes is too expensive, then perhaps you need to rethink your values. Then in there you've got the hadrons, the hydrogen ions, and they're zipping around at 99.999991, the speed of light, and at that speed, 1 second for them is 11 months for us. Their momentum goes up so that they then have the momentum of an express train, 2,000 tonnes travelling at 200 kilometres an hour. You don't want to be down there underground. Yep, another question? Or follow-up question? No, okay. Yep, down the back there. Let's move it down the back and make them happy down there. They're so lonely down there. So try throwing a big one. Oh, okay. Okay, so toss it down to the back. Here we go. Oh, well caught. Yes, congratulations, Anne.
Do you think SpaceX or NASA will send who do you think out of the two will send a man to Mars first? And do you think there's a new space race approaching?
We have to get to Mars, we have to get off the planet, we have to become a space-going race, because 2 Halloweens ago, the Earth was nearly wiped out by a rock 600 metres in diameter that missed us by 4 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon, which is really close. If this rock 600 metres in diameter had hit, somewhere between 5 and 50% of all humans would have died in the first half day. And the rest of us would have died, a lot of us would have died afterwards. There'd be no electricity on the planet, we wouldn't be here. We might have had a few diesel generators running, there might be a bit of electricity here and there. And we found out about it not 3 years before. If we had 3 years warning, we could focus our energies, like we should for climate change, focus our energies and we could nudge it out of the way. All you've got to do is shove it out of the way so that 3 years later, it's half the diameter of the Earth away from where it was going to be, 6,000 kilometres. We didn't have 3 years. We had 3 weeks. We were lucky. So one of them will get there. I do not know who. It could be an outsider as well. So much depends on various other factors. Whether the economy falls over. Something as simple as the big earthquake in California immediately pulls America out of the running and makes Russia and China and India the big contenders? Can't say. Now, we've got probably time for one more question, and then we should hang up there, or two more, or three more. Okay, keep going. Well, we'll make it till 1/4 the hour. Okay, another question? Yeah, over here.
Hey, what's your take on the difference between having free will and not having free will?
We like to think we have free will, but there's the Liebert experiment, L-I-E-B-E-R-T experiment, and what you do is you have a clock running around really fast, and it's got big numbers, and you say to the people, look, decide to press a button at some stage. Just, whenever you feel like it, press a button, and we'll pay you $100. And so you do this for about an hour, and you think, oh, well, I'll wait till it gets to 6 and I'll press the button. I'll wait till it gets to 9 now. And you decide at certain times that you will press the button. And sure enough, when we go looking at the brain activity, there's a spike of brain activity about 150, 200 milliseconds before you decide to press the button. So you can say, oh, I decided to press the button when I saw it coming to 6. And when it went to 6, I decided I would press the button next. But before you thought you decided, there was a spike of brain activity. Nobody knows. Glitch in the matrix. Too hard. Now, there's a bit of a migration here, so we'll just go for one more question, then we'll pull out. Yep, last question. Yeah, over there. Oh, is there a kid over there? No, somebody just stretching. Yep. Is that a younger person? No. Okay, right. Okay, you'll be the last question. Thank you very much.
On climate change, let's look at energy.
Speak loudly. Yep.
On energy, where do you see a future without coal? Is it solar or wind or?
There are 15 renewables, and what you use depends on where you are in the world. Already, one of the Canary Islands has gone totally renewable with a combination of wind and stored hydro. So the wind makes electricity. The electricity firstly provides electricity to power the civilization on that Canary Island, and secondly provides electricity to turn pumps to pump water up into a nearby conveniently located extinct volcano. When the wind dies down, it comes down again, running perfectly well. In Australia, we need only 2, which is solar thermal, which is not the stuff on your roof, but these big towers that heat up 100,000 tonnes of salt and can store the energy for a couple of days, and then that would provide 60% of our electricity from only a dozen sites in Australia, and then wind towers at 2 dozen. Go to the University of Melbourne homepage, University of Melbourne, Zero Carbon Australia. Zero Carbon Australia. 2 documents. The 2 meg document took me 2 hours to read and understand. The 10 meg document took me 10 hours. And by the end of it, we could do it. Think of the example of the 7th of December, 1941. Anybody knows what the significance of that is? Yes, what is that day? Pearl Harbor. Every American knows that day. And on that day, Pearl Harbor got bombed. And within 9 months, the number of motor vehicles made by the domestic market in America was 0. Within 2 years, the typical factory, like the Ford, Michigan, Dearborn factory, was pumping out these B-17 bombers, war materials. This is a huge bomber, bigger than this room, 4 engines, a whole lot of bombs, crew of 20, pumping them out at the rate of not 1 a month, 1 an hour. If we have the political will, we can fix global warming with regard to electricity and carbon dioxide within 10 years. With regard to transport, which is 15% of carbon dioxide within 15 years. With the agriculture, because you're dealing with that's 25% of our carbon dioxide, and that's dealing with life, 25 years. And then there are these machines, and if we get 900,000 of these big clunky machines the size of this, we can withdraw out of the atmosphere 1 year's supply of carbon dioxide. Now you're thinking 900,000 machines as big as this tent, that's impossible. In America, the world market for cars is 100 million a year. We can do it. We need only the political will. I ran for politics. Who voted for me? Thank you, darling family. and Shane. Nobody else voted for me. All I could afford for $5,000 was an advertisement at 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning after the ad for the abdominizer and a non-stick fry pan, but before the televangelist. Get $5 million, go for politics. Run for politics. I'm finishing off at this stage. Run for politics. In some parts of the world, power grows out of the barrel of a gun. In Australia, it grows out of politics. The best thing that the politicians ever did was say, oh, look at me, don't be a politician, you don't want to be a politician. Do you remember when John Howard used to run around in those sort of soft pastel-covered jumpsuits? Everybody remembers that. Do you also remember that in the same year, what he did was spend 2/3 of the Australian total economy for that year on some 12 badly designed and badly built submarines. You don't remember that, do you? So if you don't run for politics, they will. Just think of the example of my soulmate, Malcolm 67, who got into Parliament with 76 votes, plus one, he voted for himself. He and I share common ground on diet, not much else. So if he can get in, you can get in. Run for politics. Thank you very much, and thank you for patience. Thank you.